I am honored always. She is not a stranger. She is part of the Java fam. To introduce to some and present to others our Congresswoman, our beautiful, just wonderful Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley. Good morning, sister.
Good morning, brother.
How are you?
To you on this latest iteration and new and exciting chapter on Java with Jimmy. As I was reflecting, technically, when it comes to this platform, you're just becoming a toddler. You're only a little over 2 years old. I think that's right.
It's just about 3, but yes, ma'am.
You're 3, but you are definitely in the 99th percentile. I think you skipped walking and you went right to running.
Wow.
Congratulations. And again, thank you for this platform and this opportunity, which, certainly is no one-off. But appreciate the opportunity to engage and inform.
Absolutely. AP, as I always do, folks like yourself are advocating and moving along with the work. And that I'm also aware that within the family, there have been transitions of family members moving on. And so I have to check in on you with all due as Ayanna, the mother, the wife, the advocate. Yes. But how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I just really aim to center gratitude in all things. It has been a season of layered loss in our family. We're certainly not alone in that. And, I just want to speak a word of encouragement and life and healing into all listening today. People are carrying holes that are just too big to fill. And as I've said many times before, whenever you meet someone, everyone is walking around with these sort of tiny fractures. And your engagement, you get to decide if you want that to be an engagement that contributes to those fractures, resulting in hard breaks, or that puts them on a pathway to healing. So be kind. And also stop rescheduling your joy, as the statement says. Make that a practice. In the month of June, it's marked with significance for so many reasons. Pride, Juneteenth, Men's Health Month, Father's Day, and of course, given the roster of women that you've had, you for proving that women's history is every day and not only just during the month of March. So I'm feeling encouraged and resolved. And then finally, I'll just share, because I think it is relevant to some of what we'll get into today. I had the great honor last night. I was asked to recreate in my own voice, if you will, Dr. King's final Sunday sermon, where he delivered it at the Washington National Cathedral. That sermon was called Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution. And so I had the great honor and responsibility of trying to steward that message and to reimagine it in 2023.
Oh my.
And it was a great honor, but also incredibly fortifying to revisit that sermon. And, I think I can get into it a little bit more as we talk about some policy, but it is just, he was prophetic. Yeah. And, if you think about in 1968, this being his final Sunday sermon, remaining awake during a great revolution. And in 2023, we see these draconian forces at work that seek to weaponize wokeism, that want to lull us into a permanent sleep state with their false truths, their hate, their fear mongering, their policy violence. And so these things are cyclical.
Yeah.
These things are cyclical. And I want to shout out, I know you'll appreciate this in that you have stewarded and led a choir.
Yes.
There was a beautiful choir that sang at the Washington National Cathedral before I spoke, called Dream Launchers. Mm. And I had not heard that song in such a long time, Someday We'll All Be Free. Mm. And so again, I think, I'm talking about Take It From Me.
Yes, come on. I didn't recognize it. I need just a few more words.
Yeah, stop it. You know it. I'm not going to do it. I can't hit it's allergy season. I can't even get to that. But anyway, so speaking of Someday We'll All Be Free.
Yes, ma'am.
Just some policy stuff because to me, that's how we get there.
Well, one of the things, and I just thought about this in real time, and I have to ask this in my authentic self. You knew of some of the things to which you referred a few minutes ago around the cyclical things that are put intentionally in place to limit us. Mm-hmm. How much from the transition of a city council to a congresswoman has that become more real to you? Because there's a different cadence when you talk about it now, and I just had that thought, like, being in that where you are now in DC, like, mm-hmm. How much has that really been clarified for you?
Well, look, whenever I need to be fortified and I'm in need of clarity, I always look back and take stock of our past. I look to the blueprint of those who came before me when I need clarity and direction. And so in doing that, it has just reaffirmed for me that the path to justice is nonlinear, that Coretta Scott King had it right when she said freedom is won or earned in every generation, because ostensibly gains are not guaranteed every time there is progress. I mean, when you see this super majority that I'm proud to be a part of, that you and your listeners are a part of, this super majority, where there's a shift that's occurring. I don't think we're in a racial reckoning, but I think there's a power shift, a culture shift led by this super majority of the most marginalized. And so what we're in the midst of right now is backlash, is white lash, is attempts to turn back the hands of time, to roll back and to undermine gains that have been made in civil rights and human rights. Pardon me.
Yes, ma'am.
So we've been here before, and instead of that discouraging me,
yep.
It anchors me, because I know this is just simply the work of justice, and yep. So and I always knew. I always knew that federal policy had been the contributor. Had sort of this trickle down legislated oppression and marginalization, very precisely for Black Americans and other marginalized people, really began with federal policy. What you see that shows up, that manifests on the municipal and state level, it starts federal. So, if you really want to do radical work in the definition of Angela Y. Davis, it means to get to the root. And so to get to the root, to me, is federal policy.
Well, let's jump right in on something that you're working on, because I just had this thought. You and Senator Warren worked on canceling student debt, but there's so much intersectionality in the roots of structural racism and whatnot are all intertwined. And so one of those key major things is how we address criminal justice reform and allow people to, if they've made mistakes, to, pay that back, quote unquote, debt to society and things like that. But there's still things in place that limit us. And so what is it that you're working on now to change that? And also, I know you're working on some housing stuff in relation to that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so first, I just think, again, as we're heading into a season of Juneteenth, Freedom Day, I mean, I remain squarely focused on the work of full freedom and liberation for Black people every day. But as we enter into this Juneteenth season, I'm reintroducing the People's Justice Guarantee. And it's called the People's Justice Guarantee because it was developed cooperatively with the people closest to the pain. Because when it comes to criminal legal reform, and including folks behind the wall, I did congressional hearings behind the wall and focus groups and things like that. So the working with impacted families, working with folks behind the wall, working with activists and advocates, we have developed this radical reimagining of our criminal legal system, one which centers the humanity and dignity of people. It's comprehensive, it's decarceration focused, and it's trauma informed. And it really outlines a fair, equitable, and just legal system. And so this is a reintroduction, which is very common in a legislative process. You know, as you continue to reintroduce a bill, you gain more co-sponsors, and that helps you to get the heft and the leverage that you need to get it to the committee of jurisdiction, hopefully marked up, and then to the floor for a vote. And so, but I wanted a people's justice guarantee because I felt we needed, and the people felt we needed, a new North Star. And so I wanted something, again, comprehensive, decarceration focused, trauma informed, that was crafted with the people. So I used that framework, that new North Star of the people's justice guarantee, to introduce legislation like counseling, not criminalization, the End Pushout Act, my federal bill to abolish the death penalty. So it's been this umbrella piece of organization where all of my other criminal legal reform work has sat under that. And so now we're adding to this people's justice guarantee within that framework, that new North Star, housing first. And this is legislation, again, that was crafted in cooperation with those closest to the pain. And I want to give you the acronym. So housing first, that acronym is Housing for Formerly Incarcerated, Reentry and Stable Tenancy Act. So that's what the first stands for, okay? Housing for Formerly Incarcerated, Reentry and Stable Tenancy Act. And I introduced this legislation with Representative Rashida Tlaib. And this actually is work that started for me. One of my favorite things about working on the federal level now is when I can pull that thread of something I started on the municipal level in the micro, then now I get to address at the root in the macro. And I remember in my time on the council learning that 30% of those being released from correctional facilities were being released to shelters, to homeless shelters, which is very disingenuous if you're serious about people legitimately getting back on the grid after they've paid their debt to society and making a positive contribution. They need housing first. And so the fact of the matter is that because of policies within housing authorities, because of discrimination from landlords, those with criminal histories often struggle to access safe and stable housing. And they're limited by the inclusion of criminal history on tenant background checks. And so, just to share some numbers on this, landlords refusing to rent to folks with a criminal record impacts nearly 1 in 3 adults in America, with Black and brown folks having the highest rates of housing denials, and formerly incarcerated people are 10 times more likely to be homeless. And so this is what our Housing First Act seeks to confront and to change.
That's one of the things, not only for those that are formerly incarcerated coming out of incarceration in general, housing is needed. And I like one of the things that you said, you're centering the approach to equity in the criminal justice system around humanity. And I think that being the lens, it takes away race, it takes away ethnicity, and that being the lens to push it through. Hopefully it will be guaranteed. Earlier on, you said that nothing is guaranteed. So I'm hearing that there's some intentionality, even in that you said a few minutes ago before we went live, words matter. And so will this keep sort of a guarantee once we get it across, once the bill passes?
Well, first, if you care about people who have been incarcerated, your loved ones, neighbors, community members, once they've paid their debt, if you care about their successful re-entering, if you care about their successful reintegration, which to me is everything from family stabilization and real job opportunities and breaking the cycle of recidivism, housing is fundamental to that. So it's true, many of the social and racial justice and civil rights gains that we've made are not guaranteed, because we see them being undermined and attacked every day. But that is because of our growing supermajority of power. And so we're in the midst of a moment of white supremacist backlash.
Yep.
And so that backlash is leading with an attempt to roll back. But I have to keep legislating. I have to keep organizing. I have to keep mobilizing, because I can't just do that when the Democrats are in the majority in the House. One of the things that Dr. King spoke about in that sermon about staying awake in the midst of a great revolution, gosh, I lost the point that I wanted to get to there. But
it happens to preachers sometimes.
That does happen. And the thing is that the text is so rich, but there was a point that I wanted to make there. It'll come back to me. But, the point is, I have to remain vigilant, and I can't wait until Democrats are back in the majority. I have to continue to do this work. Oh, this is what it was. What Dr. King said is that he was not a consensus seeker. He was a consensus builder. Okay? So when he was being criticized for his stance against the Vietnam War, when he gave this final Sunday sermon, he was one of the most unpopular people in America. Very unpopular. And so people had come to him, like the Southern Poverty Law Center and other partners and allies, and said, you're alienating and upsetting a lot of people. You're losing a lot of friends. And he said, that's okay. I'm not a consensus seeker. I'm a consensus builder. And so one of the ways that I seek to build consensus, to stoke consciousness, is to continue to organize, continue to agitate, continue to legislate on the issues of consequence. And again, with this North Star of the People's Justice Guarantee and the reintroduction of this, I'm like, lately I have enjoyed being called a representative instead of a congresswoman, because what great honor to be a representative of the people to Washington with a mandate. And so, I'm like the 1 in 4 children in the Massachusetts 7th who have an incarcerated parent, loved one, or caregiver. In the country, 1 out of 28 children in our country have an incarcerated parent, loved one, or caregiver. So I'm here to be a representative and to be a consensus builder and a justice seeker.
I'll ask this. You kind of touched on it based on what you talked about that you're doing in DC. It just often baffles me, Representative Pressley. You have to, wonderful cup there, that you have to build consensus around things that you just would believe the humanity in people would just allow them to go ahead and vote, do what it is they need to do to level the playing field on equity. It makes no sense that we're still have to build consensus around things that are a no-brainer for improved quality of life.
Well, or just for basic human rights. And at the end of the day, so much of what we're talking about with racial justice, civil rights, when you boil it all down, you're really just talking about human rights.
Yes.
You think access to safe and stable housing, to accessible, quality, affordable health care, to air that is breathable and water that is drinkable. These things should be fundamental human rights. But again, I find comfort and instruction and prescription in the past, because remember, in the midst of all the marches and the boycotts, that when Dr. King and others with him, architects of this movement, met with President Johnson, and they were trying to pass the Civil Rights Act, and then later the Voting Rights Act, he said, make me do it. And so I always go back to that, which is that government has shown us time and time again that more often than not, it does not lead, it responds. And so, I'm not standing alone. Right. I am the manifestation of not only our ancestors' wildest dreams, but a representative of a broader movement, and a movement that wants to dramatically reduce jail and prison populations, that wants to change the experience of confinement for those who are there, that wants to eliminate wealth-based discrimination and corporate profiteering, that wants to invest in impacted communities, that wants to bring folks home. And I do want to take a note, given that you have Lieutenant Governor Driscoll and Governor Healy joining you momentarily, and I'm sure they'll talk about this. But look, who you vote for determines who's elected. Who's elected determines the policies, and the policies determine who lives, who dies, who survives, who thrives. And so I do want to thank my partner in the corner office. It's good to have a Democrat there, Maura Healy, for the pardons that just came out yesterday. And one of those, Terrence Williams, is someone that we certainly fought for. And I just want to commend the Healy Driscoll administration. It is very rare for a governor this early in their tenure to do pardons. And so, again, who you vote for determines who's elected determines the policies, and the policies determine who lives, who dies, who survives, who thrives. And so that's why we are reintroducing the People's Justice Guarantee, this North Star, this radical reimagining of our criminal legal system that is trauma-informed, comprehensive, and decarceration focused, and was crafted in partnership with the people. And I'm excited that now this Housing First legislation to combat the housing discrimination that those coming out of our correctional facilities experience. Because if you want to break the cycles of recidivism, you have to support people in their successful integration and reentry. And that begins with housing. Jimmy, one other thing, I never know what I want to call you, Jimmy, James. Yes. I'll just say, brother, just three quick things I want to say before our time leaves. One, happy Father's Day.
Thank you so much.
To you, to every man who's playing that paternal role in a child's life, whether you're doing it as an uncle, as a dad, as a grandfather, a caregiver, whatever. And I do just want to lift up and affirm that Black dads matter. So much. And I want to take a moment just to give my own quick testimony, and that I just, I'm so grateful for second chances and grace and mercy and redemption. Many of you know my father was incarcerated for most of my life, and so we did not have a relationship. And 9 years ago, he walked me down the aisle to marry the love of my life. And he and my husband enjoy a very close relationship. You all hear me talk so much about my mother, Sandy, but I just wanted to lift up my brilliant, loving, handsome, he would definitely want me to say that, father, Martin, who upon re-entering into society, went on to teach on the college level. He was a professor of journalism and became a published author. And I'm very proud of him. But most of all, I'm just grateful for our second chance, and, just want folks to know it is possible. And so I wanted to just take a moment to lift up the two Black men that I love most, my father, Martin Terrell, and my husband, Conan Harris. So happy Father's Day, everyone.
AP, I know your time is short. I want to stay in good with the team, so I don't get in trouble.
No, you got a heavy roster. So, but I appreciate you. Happy Father's Day, family. Happy Juneteenth, Freedom Day. Stay awake, y'all, and someday we'll all be free.
Absolutely.